You have driven it 1,000 times without a single thought. The overpass that has always been there. The gray ribbon that was old when your parents were young, and will be there, you assume, long after you're gone. Concrete feels like the closest thing we build to forever. That is the trick. Because the road under your tires was never meant to last, and the new one already knows it. Here is the strange thing about a road. It is the one piece of the modern world we treat as permanent scenery. We name our exits, memorize our merges, and file the whole surface away under things that do not change. A mountain erodes, a river moves, but the highway, we decide, simply is. It was poured before we got here, and it will be poured over long after we leave. That belief is exactly what this story is about. Not the road you can see, but the promise buried under it. Because America was sold a highway meant to outlast everyone who would ever drive on it, and the country agreed, quietly, to stop asking how long that would actually be. The answer is not comforting, and the newest, most advanced version of that promise, the one engineers now brag can hold up for a century, is already breaking in places where the concrete has not even finished curing. Before we go further, if you like the kind of thing that makes you look twice at something you drive over every single day and never think about, take a second to subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel. And I want to know one thing while you're here. What highway do you drive most? The one you could navigate with your eyes closed? Drop it in the comments. Odds are it's older than you think, and holding on by less than you'd like. Let's get into it. Start with the promise, because it was enormous. On June 29, 1956, President Dwight Eisenhower signed the Federal Aid Highway Act, and with one signature launched what would become roughly 47,000 miles of interstate, a network that eventually cost on the order of $130 billion and rewired the entire country. It was pitched the way we pitch moonshots, the largest public works project in human history, a concrete tapestry stitching every American place to every other. A man could now drive coast to coast without a single traffic light. It felt like building something that would stand for 1,000 years. But permanence was never in the fine print. It was never in the fine print at all. When engineers actually designed those roads, they built them to a 20-year design life. 20 years. The gleaming symbol of American permanence was, on paper, a 2-decade product. And the reason it didn't collapse on schedule is the first quiet truth of this whole story. Nobody intended for it to be temporary out loud. They simply assumed the future would keep paying to rebuild it. The 1956 law that funded the greatest road system on Earth included almost nothing for maintaining it. As one highway historian put it, Congress behaved like a family that builds a beautiful new house and never sets aside a dime for the day the roof goes bad. The roof went bad faster than anyone guessed. The interstates were carrying more cars and far heavier trucks than the planners had ever modeled. Segments that were supposed to absorb 20 years of wear absorbed it in a fraction of that time. And here is the part almost no driver knows, the reason a single truck matters so much more than your car does. Back in the late 1950s, near Ottawa, Illinois, the highwaymen ran an experiment that would define road building for the next half-century. They drove army trucks in endless loops over test pavement, millions of miles of it, around the clock, just to watch roads die. What they found became known as the fourth power law, and it is brutal. Double the weight on an axle and you don't do twice the damage. You do 16 times the damage. Follow that curve out and a single loaded 18-wheeler grinds a road the way thousands of cars would. By one federal estimate, close to 10,000 of them. Every commute, you share the pavement with vehicles that are, structurally speaking, erasing the road beneath you. You are driving on the light end of a machine built for the heavy end. So the interstate aged, and America did what it always does with the thing it refuses to see. It patched. It resurfaced. It stretched a 20-year road toward 50, 60, 70 years, and called that success. Today, more than a third of the interstate system is over 50 years old. A third of its bridges need repair or replacement. And the country's civil engineers, the people who actually know, grade America's roads a D+. That is the good news, by the way. It is an improvement over the D they gave a few years back. Which brings us to the fix. Because the modern answer to a crumbling 20-year road is a beautiful phrase the pavement industry now sells with real conviction. 100-year pavement, thicker beds, better drainage, engineered layers, the whole science of longevity. Roads designed not to last a generation, but to last a century, to finally break the cycle of tearing everything up every couple of decades. It is the promise in the title. Build it once, build it to outlive us all. And then you look at what actually happens when they pour it. Go to downtown Sacramento, to a stretch of Highway 50 that the state spent about $511 million to rebuild, a project explicitly meant to replace tired 1960s pavement and carry the city for decades to come. New concrete went down in the summer of 2023. Within roughly a year, inspectors found it cracking, chunks breaking loose. Not from earthquakes, not from decades of trucks, from the pour itself. The concrete had been laid too thick and hadn't been properly vibrated as it set, and testing showed it simply didn't meet the state's own specifications. A 280-foot section, about the length of 3 basketball courts laid end to end, had to be torn out and poured again. The brand new road, the one built to last, failed before it was old enough to have a pothole. The contractor ate the cost, and officials were quick to call it rare. But that is precisely the point. The promise is a century. The reality can be months. And even when they get the pour right, the world is working against it every single day. This is the second quiet truth. A road is not a solid thing sitting on the ground. It is a thin skin stretched over dirt, and everything wants underneath it. Water finds the smallest crack and seeps below the surface. In winter it freezes, expands, and pries the layers apart. Then a heavy truck rolls over that hidden pocket of water and slams it downward like a hammer, blowing out the base from below. Do that 10,000 times a day and you get the pothole that swallowed your alignment last spring. Add the salt we pour on roads to melt ice, which quietly eats concrete and corrodes the steel inside it. Add the coastal air. The road is losing a slow war with physics that begins the moment it's finished. Now widen the lens, because the ground itself is changing under the whole system. More than 60,000 miles of America's coastal roads already sit in the path of rising water. Along the Gulf Coast alone, federal researchers estimate that some 2,400 miles of major roadway could be permanently underwater within the next 50 to 100 years. That is the cruel irony folded into a 100-year promise. You can engineer pavement to last a century, and the coastline it runs along may not be there to hold it. So why don't we just fix all of it? Here is the money truth, and it is almost funny if you don't think about it too hard. The main way America pays to build and repair its roads is the federal gas tax, 18.4 cents a gallon. That number was set in 1993 and has not moved since. Not for inflation, not for anything. A generation of rising costs and more efficient engines has quietly gutted it. The engineers estimate the tax has lost around 80% of its buying power since the year it was frozen. Every year you fill up, you are paying for the roads with $1993. Meanwhile, potholes alone cost American drivers something like $26 billion a year in blown tires and bent rims, and closing the roadway funding gap over the next decade runs into the hundreds of billions. We are trying to maintain a 21st century country on a paycheck we stopped adjusting when Jurassic Park was in theaters. And still, this is the thing. We drive over all of it without a flicker of concern. That is what this story is really about. Not the crack in the concrete, the agreement not to look at it. We have decided the road is permanent because looking closely would change how the drive feels, the same way the whole country decided the interstate would last forever. Because the alternative was admitting we built the greatest road system on Earth and never funded its old age. The overpass you pass under twice a day was poured to a 20-year plan and is running on year 60. The new stretch they just cut the ribbon on may already be cracking under the paint. And somewhere out ahead of you, on a coast you'll drive to this summer, there's a highway built to last 100 years, running along a shoreline that has maybe 50 left. The concrete tells you none of this. That's the whole point of concrete. It looks like forever, right up until the morning a piece of it is lying in your lane. And even then, most of us just steer around it and keep driving and go on believing the road was always there and always will be. The way we've believed it since long before anyone stopped to ask what built to last was ever really promising.